for taking time today. There you go. Okay, excellent. So thanks everyone for taking time today. And for those of you who are watching this after post haste, good for you for enjoying the evening. I'm always grateful when people take sort of discretionary time, because what I just would like to honor is that you're taking time for you, which is a lot of times that's easier said than done. So today we're going to talk about career growth and accelerating career growth. And for me, the journey of career growth has really been a journey of growth, like personal growth. As part of Beyond Barriers, we encourage everybody to come up with a moniker so that we can talk about the value that we bring over the things that we've done. My moniker is the power generator. I turn possibility into performance. And I started my career indeed doing interviews at truck stops and paying truckers $20 to talk to me about the environment. But before that, I was a summer camp counselor at YMCA Camp Pamingo outside of Louisville, Kentucky. And I include that because it was actually a camp that I learned how to lead, and I learned that I could be a leader, and I got kind of tuned into that path that drove me. I never thought I would be in the corporate world. I went to a very, very liberal arts college, teeny tiny college for kids who left high school early in the Berkshires in Massachusetts. And I thought this whole corporate thing was just kind of evil. And then I found myself there, and I found myself very successful there. So I spent some time at creative agencies, worked at Twitter post IPO, spent some time at a fintech, which is now a unicorn here in Chicago, called Avant. And then I spent quite a few years at cars.com, where I was the chief marketing and eventually chief product officer. And in that time, we took the company public, and onboarded a board and replatformed a 20-year-old website and managed an activist investor. So I've encountered a lot of lessons along the way, some that I wanted to and some that I didn't, but all that I'm really grateful for. And what I'm excited about sharing with you today is a little bit about what we've discovered with creating Beyond Barriers. So I started Beyond Barriers about 2.5 years ago with my wife, Laura, and our two co-founders, Monica and Nikki. They are actually both married. So what could possibly go wrong with 4 women who are married to each other starting a company? We came together, each of us from different corporate backgrounds. So we've all been operators in different ways. But we each realize a similar insight, which is that we lose people at critical junctures, and we lose in particular women and underrepresented groups at a couple of junctures. And it's right in the middle when you jump kind of individual contributor to manager. And then there's another drop off in the more senior years. And it's almost never because of ambition or ability. It's very often because we make assumptions about what's possible, and companies make assumptions about our ambitions, and we sort of miss each other. But then there's also this gap that we uncovered in navigational skills, and navigational skills are the things that I want to talk about today. And that's really the foundation for Beyond Barriers and the work that we do with leading companies and individuals around the world. So you can see each of our monikers here. Nikki's is actually updated. She's the Moonshot Maverick now, but we all have extensive experience. And we brought that experience together to create this company. Many of you may be familiar with this data. This is a couple years old, but it's no less extreme. And so, we know that not everybody advances at the same rate within corporate or even not-for-profit environments, right? There's a gap. There's a broken rung in the ladder, and that's the rung that we're looking to fix. So you can see at the entry level, it looks more dispersed from a demographic perspective, but then the numbers for women and people of color just get smaller and smaller as you go up the ladder. And so the idea that, can we intervene at a couple of these junctures and help folks go further faster? Can we help accelerate? Is one that involves a lot of learning and a lot of unlearning, right? Unlearning the assumptions that we have and unlearning what we've been taught about keeping our heads down and working really hard and assuming great things will happen, and learning to integrate practices around really advocating for ourselves and taking the lead in our own careers and taking the wheel in our own careers. Oop. Okay. How many of you have ever felt like you're working twice as hard to go half as far? Anyone? I think most of us have at one point or another. And so the idea with Beyond Barriers is, can we flip this? Can we help people work half as hard to go twice as far? So everything we do is grounded in the momentum metric. Melanie shared the link with you all in advance of this meeting. We developed this metric in partnership with Columbia University. And effectively, we're asking people questions about these 5 C's. So clarity, courage, conviction, commitment, and community. And the reason we knew we were onto something was because CEO down to college graduate, almost everybody starts out in the 50s or 60s in terms of percentages on their global momentum metric. And so we knew that these were things that were not only universally relevant, but universally an opportunity for most people who are working today. After our 12-week accelerator and moving on, we tend to see scores skyrocket into the 80s or 90s. So we're seeing real movement on an individual level, but we're also seeing from a company perspective, significant increases in engagement, retention, promotability, and excuse me, and performance. So those are the measures that we focus on. And here's, you can see kind of the starting scores and after the 12 weeks. Okay, so I want to talk about these 5 C's today because these are really the keys to unlocking that career momentum. We've seen this work with people from all over the world. Actually, after this, I have another meeting with folks from China and Australia. We believe that these are really keys. You'll hear me say the word practice a lot. Most of this stuff is like yoga. It's not stuff that you ever master, but they are perennial questions that we should all be asking ourselves. And they're often things that get neglected most, particularly for women who end up the last person on our own list. For many people, they describe this experience as self-care because we don't, which is a commentary on how we take care of ourselves, in my opinion. But it's an opportunity to really take a beat and focus on what do you want to get out of your career. Okay, so clarity is all about defining your North Star and your unique value. Your unique is hard to say. So the effectory organization tells us that clarity can increase effectiveness by 25%, which is pretty significant. And we know that when you have clarity, you know what to focus on, you know what your worth is. It helps you zero in on what's going to have the biggest impact on your career. So clarity can unleash confidence. It can, help you stand up and stand out. And it can empower us to take the risks that will help us go chase our dreams. And I want to be clear about clarity. This isn't to say that everyone should be CEO of the organization or the organization. This is really about each person understanding, getting the clarity about what's their path, right? And what are they trying to achieve and why. So the goal of this work is not to turn out lots of super senior leaders, but it really is to help everybody find the purpose and meaning in their work that matters to them. Because once we know what we're working toward, and we can practice articulating that succinctly and clearly for ourselves and others, that's where we start to generate the value, the increased value. And so the answer is different for everybody on clarity, but getting clear about what we want can help unlock immense performance and abundance. So conversely, lack of clarity can stall progress. It can take us down the wrong path. And so this is where we start in terms of getting unstuck. Incidentally, this is also the hardest thing. So in our 12-week accelerator, we start with clarity, and most people work on clarity for the entirety of the 12 weeks. I spent my career writing brand strategies for some of the world's biggest brands, and this was the hardest thing that I've ever done, right? Thinking about, what do I want to be known for? How do I want to position myself? How do I want to frame myself? So it takes some doing. But I want to share a story that sort of makes the point of why this is important. So this is my co-founder, Monica Marcus. And Monica was sitting on a panel. She has this incredible storied career. She's worked at Google and JLL, and she wrote the returnship program for Goldman Sachs. And so she was sitting on a panel full of peers from the DEI and HR field, and they went down the row, and she said, hi, I'm Melanie, and I'm head of DEI for Intel, and hi, I'm Shana, and I'm the head of DEI for HP, and hi, I'm Sylvia, and I'm head of DEI for, right? And everybody sort of said the same thing. And it came to Monica, and she said, hi, I'm Monica and I lead diversity at Google, but my friends call me the MacGyver for the marginalized. Which, by the way, I don't think anybody's beat. I think this is the best moniker ever. I think we don't, it's just so powerful and so interesting. And you know, the impact of that is, one, you get a sense of what her special sauce is. You get curious about who she is. And you may not remember anything that I say tonight, but my guess is you will remember MacGyver for the marginalized, right? And so when we think about clarity and articulating our value, coming up with this moniker is a key to the equation. And excuse me, I have a 7-year-old joining me. Hang on one second. Oops. Yeah.
I love when life happens, and this is how we roll. I love that. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. This is kind of, I think, what we've all had to deal with at some point in time. I just wanted to let everybody know, if anybody has any questions for Brooke along the way, please feel free to use the chat. I know that Shannon and I are monitoring the chat as things go along, and we'll certainly let Brooke know. All right.
Oops. Sorry. Okay. Thank you for your grace there. He's looking for his iPad. So this is, you know, the expression, is like your unique value proposition, right? And so when we think about unique value proposition, we think about the intersection of your how, your why, and your who being the constituents or communities that matter to you. And the moniker is often just a distillation of this unique value proposition. It's usually a sentence that captures your value, your unique positioning. So I say, I'm Brooke Ricketts. I'm a founder and a growth strategist, and I'm the power generator. I turn possibility into performance. We also favor alliteration, but it is not required in this. So your moniker, on the other hand, is kind of like a tagline. It's a phrase or a series of words that captures your magic or your sparkle, but it also helps people see what they can come to you for, right? And this is particularly relevant for folks who are redefining themselves or, you know, doing a career pivot. I've known you for this, and now I want you, or you know me for this, and now I want you to know me for this. It can be really helpful and really impactful. Saying this out loud is very awkward at first, and it's worth practicing within safe spaces. The other thing that I would suggest is, when you're coming up with a moniker, is to get feedback from other people, because like I said, it's really hard to do this for yourself and by yourself, but often you'll get a lot of inspiration when you ask other people what your special sauce is. This is hard to do by yourself, and so we've actually created an AI prompt to get you started. So your role in this is that you need to come up with some words that you want to be known for. And then you can use this AI prompt, write a catchy, inspirational, self-promotional sentence about Melanie, who wants to be known for and describes herself using the words below, and then also suggest an empowering moniker. It's, again, this is a place to start. They're often kind of cheesy, but sometimes they'll bring in words that you may not have thought of, and it can be a helpful writing partner, because then you can say, make it less cheesy, or make it more serious, or make it more professional. So this is a good way to get started. Many of our members have their moniker as their headline on LinkedIn. Which is a fantastic opportunity, because again, you want people to lean into who you are, but also to be really clear about what you're trying to achieve. Okay, we're not going to do breakouts because we only have an hour, but the task here is to think about 3 words that you want others to use when they're talking about you when you're not in the room, right? So it's a little bit different than what you want to be known for, but those words can often be really good clues to how to define your moniker and your unique value proposition. And again, you can use those in the AI prompt as well. Okay. So encourage, we talk about overcoming limiting beliefs to advance with confidence. So once you know where you want to go, then often one of our biggest challenges is to get out of our own way, right? So how do we stop ourselves from getting in our own way, excuse me, and walk the path that we're trying to walk with confidence? So when I was pregnant with my second child, my friend's daughter, Indy, came to me and she told me that she really wanted to babysit. She was 7 years old at the time. And I said, okay, cool, Indy, like, tell me, what are your qualifications? Like, why do you think you would be a great babysitter? And this is what she said. She said, I haven't dropped a baby yet. And after we got over giggling, we said, wow, if you walk into every job interview with that kind of confidence, you are going to be okay in this world, right? And then I thought to myself, I bet this is how a lot of guys walk into interviews. And we know this quantitatively, right? We know that that men tend to be valued on their potential and women tend to be valued on our performance or our proof, right? I know I would absolutely crush that job, right? Oh, I haven't done it before, but I definitely know that I could, right? And here's the proof. So this idea of courage and getting out of our own way and positioning ourselves effectively, of course I can do it, right? As Indy said, I haven't not done it, so why couldn't I do it? And I love that framing here. Okay, so Harvard Business Review took two groups of equally, like objectively equally performing men and women, and they asked them to rate themselves. And these people performed exactly the same, and they were eligible for the same comp, the same everything. And the men in the group rated themselves 61 out of 100, and the women in the group rated themselves 46 out of 100. And we know that leaders tend to all of the caveats that could apply here, but the takeaway is whatever you're doing, give yourself a 33% bump, right? Because somebody else who's doing the exact same job that you are is probably giving themselves that bump, right? And so part of courage is really understanding how to promote yourself and get really clear and candid about what you have accomplished and what that means, right? And so the gender differences that play out with self-promotion actually end up contributing to gender gaps in pay equity, to career advancement, and leadership representation. So again, men are engaging in self-promotion, but they're also rating themselves higher. And when we talk about courage, we talk a lot about self-promotion, and we hear a lot of that feels icky. I don't want to do that. I want to be humble. I'm concerned that I'll be perceived as a self-promoter. But really the idea here is to help others understand the value that you bring so that the people around you can understand better how to utilize and maximize the knowledge and the skills that you have in a way that benefits the company, right? So if you can't think of it as a benefit to yourself, think about it as a benefit to your boss or your team or your company. Staying in the shadows does not serve you. It doesn't serve your manager, and it doesn't serve your team or your company. We also focus here on imposter syndrome, right? And 79% of us, regardless of what our backgrounds are like or what we look like or where we come from, experience imposter syndrome. We also know that great manager relationships can significantly help alleviating feelings of imposter syndrome. So this is a pretty sticky thing that affects us all. But one of the things that we talk about is how can we reframe limiting beliefs in terms of empowering beliefs. And we talk about Susan Wojcicki, who was the CEO of YouTube, and she's a leader who really, really struggled with self-promotion. And again, she talks about this. She did a TED Talk about this. It's just phenomenal. She talks about that this isn't about being arrogant or self-serving, and it is about being confident in your abilities and sharing your value with others. So one of the things that helped this person become more comfortable with self-promotion was to focus on her impact. So she wasn't talking about herself, but she was focusing on the impact that she created and started to tell that story, because it didn't feel good to say, yeah, that was awesome, I did that, right? But it did feel okay to her to say, the outcome of my work was this, right? And so that's a subtle difference, but for many people, it can make all the difference, right? And what we know is that when we start telling our stories, opportunities emerge, right? Because people get to know us and the value that we bring and the way that we can contribute. And so some specific things that Susan did to get comfortable with self-promotion was she talked about how she was making a difference in the world, and that gave her the confidence to talk about it more openly. She started really small. So she started by talking about accomplishments in her performance reviews and then networking with other leaders. And then she started writing blog posts about her work, and she found a role model. So she looked up to other women who were good at promoting themselves, and she learned from them. And then lastly, she remembered that self-promotion is not about bragging, but it really is about sharing that value. So this can be a real unlock in terms of career momentum. And it's amazing how many people who we work with of all genders and all backgrounds and all levels still really struggle with this. Okay. So what we like to say here in terms of courage is, a key is to own your accomplishments, right? Own what you've accomplished. It's okay to say, I'm really proud of the way that I did this and the team did that, right? Work with a lot of people who focus on the team, but it's okay to lead with I. It's good to lead with I. It's good to ask for feedback and be specific about the feedback that we're asking for. When we use the words the team, when we use the words, sort of what we accomplished, we instead of saying, the team did this, we can say, here's how I helped my team build this product, right? And really taking credit where credit is due. And then when we talk about asking for what we want, the most important thing is to be specific. So not just I want a promotion, or I want to join the leadership team, or I want to be I want to drive this change in the world, but in the next 6 months, I'm looking to get connected with 6 Fortune 200 organizations who would be good candidates for Beyond Barriers. I see that you're connected to 3 of these companies. Can you help me identify the right people to connect with there, right? So getting really clear and specific about what we're trying to accomplish and then talking about it. When I started my journey to board work, I had a really amazing board mentor who I met at a conference, and I asked her to talk to me about boards. And she basically laid out, like she said, okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to start talking about this. You're going to tell everybody that you talked to about this. And then about a year later, you're going to get your first call and you'll interview for that board and you won't get it. But then about 9 months later, you'll get your second call and you may get that or the one after that. But then after you get that one, then the board offers will follow. And it happened exactly as she said. Like to the day. But what I started doing the next day was every time I got a call from a recruiter, even if I wasn't looking for a job, I took that call and I listened and I gave them some names. And then I took the opportunity to say, not the time for me right now, but I'm also really interested in getting on a board. And so can you keep me in mind when you have those roles open, right? Just to let everybody know what you're trying to accomplish can make such a big difference. And for many people, it's a huge barrier. It's a huge speed bump where people get stuck. Lastly, stay receptive to feedback, right? And you all probably all know this, but feedback is a gift. Sometimes it's not the most welcome gift, but it really is a gift. And so whether it's positive or constructive, stay open-minded, humble, and curious, listen to understand, and then evaluate, right? Everybody's wrong some of the time. And so, take what works for you and leave the rest. Okay. The other piece that we try to encourage folks to walk in every room with is strong opinions held loosely, right? So this is always having a point of view and always being willing, and a point of view where you've got solid supporting data, not just something that you made up or something that you think is interesting, but really having a well thought through point of view, and then really being as willing to be right as you are willing to be wrong, right? Go in with a point of view so that you're in the conversation, so that you're participating at the highest level, and then make decisions, prioritize action as you follow up. That can really help sort of elicit that courage that helps you participate in a full way. Okay. So if courage is about getting out of our own way, conviction is really about broadening your aperture to anticipate and adapt to get ahead of the curve. So many times we work with folks who are just really, really focused on what's right in front of them. And the key to staying tuned in to opportunities is really to have a broader view. So earlier in my career, I did some work with Whirlpool. We went around the world and we did focus groups. We were trying to get men and women around the world to upgrade their appliances. And so we talked to folks and we talked about, what would be interesting about this and what, why is there a gap? Why haven't you bought this appliance? What, and there was there was a global insight that emerged, which was the women that we spoke with said to us, I need to be a better cook in order to justify the purchase of that appliance. And the men that we spoke with said, that thing's going to make me a better cook. And for most people, they can relate this example to other equipment in their life, whether it's sporting equipment or otherwise, right? But the point is that, again, this, like, if we're evaluating ourselves based on the proof versus our potential, or, deploying the tools that can help us get ahead, then we're gonna be holding ourselves back. So there's an incredible researcher named Ruth Chang, and she studies decision making. And she says that women are 16 times more likely to avoid making hard choices because they're afraid of the consequences. So she did research that due to the triple bind, which is the expectation that we're good parents, spouses, and employees, it makes it really difficult to make choices that may be in the best, that may not be in the best interest of their family or their careers, of our family or our careers. So she has pretty extensive research, and she suggests that, we need to find ways to overcome this triple bind and hurry sickness in order to make better decisions. And she recommends a lot of what we do in Beyond Barriers, which is taking the time to reflect on our values and priorities, and thinking about how do we make decisions that are aligned with those values and priorities. So as we walk through, our Beyond Barriers kind of core accelerator and the other coursework that we offer, a lot of it is about grounding back in what are you trying to accomplish and why, right? So starting with that clarity, and using that as a filter for everything that you do, for the decisions that you make, for the things you say yes to, for the things you say no to, for the perspectives that you bring in the room. And so she says, to thrive, you have to stand for something. Drifters allow the world to write the story of their lives, and committers become the author of theirs. You may have seen some of this research. 50% of all professionals will likely need to reskill by next year. And the shelf life of skills is decreasing, right? It's less than 18 months and rapidly shrinking. I don't know if you've heard of the phrase FOBO, which is the fear of becoming obsolete, which seems to be permeating every room that I go into lately. Oops, sorry. Nope, come on, here we go. So this is a framework. One of the things that we talk about in terms of broadening your aperture, it's easy to get caught up in how is AI going to steal my job, or what's going on with the numbers and how are they going to affect, or is this role going to even be a part of the budget for next year? In order to really effectively expand your aperture, this is one of many, many frameworks that we encourage folks to take a look at. So this is the STEEP framework. And the idea is that you take a step back on the social, technological, economic, ecological, and political things going on in your space, right? So that could be your not-for-profit space, that could be your community, that could be your school, that could be your whatever, right? And so you just take a minute to write down, and this is a really helpful exercise to do in a group because you get different perspectives on this as opposed to just your own perspective. And you say, what are the top things that are affecting us from a social, technological, economic, ecological, and political perspective? And then you say, what are the implications? And the important thing here is, like, this is not about having the perfect research or having the perfect answers. This is about having the conversation and continuously thinking about and talking about these things, so that when you think about what's going to happen next, and when you think about what's the next right role for you and what's the next move that you want to make, you're thinking about the macro perspective at the same time, which can help you make better decisions. Okay, so commitment is about focusing on the right thing at the right time. And we hear that this is This is really, really hard. I talked to one of our alumna who said before she did the work with Beyond Barriers, she felt like a squirrel. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I was just like scurrying around all day with like nuts in my cheeks, just checking things off of other people's lists. And I thought like, it's such a great visual. And I have certainly felt like a squirrel at many points in my career. But the idea with commitment is, understanding what we're really focused on and then making sure that we accomplish the things that we set out to accomplish and not getting distracted by things that may not be urgent or important to us. Okay, so according to research by the University of Scranton, 92% of us do not achieve our goals. Which is hard to say, it's hard to share. And usually this is not because we're not capable of achieving our goals. Usually it's because we didn't calibrate our goals correctly, right? So we did something like say, I'm going to run a marathon in a week, even though I haven't run in a year, right? Or we said, I'm going to read 24 books this year, and then it's June and I've only read 2, but I'm still going to stick to that goal, right? So we're not estimating, we're not calibrating, we're not thinking about, we're not grounding our goals in what's realistic or what's possible, and we're not keeping track of them. Is anyone familiar with Dr. Kazmikia Corbett? So she's an incredible woman who I came across doing some research. She's a Black virologist and immunologist, and she was a key member of the team who developed the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. And she did this with a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and during the pandemic, and with literally the weight of the world on her shoulders. And there was a really great profile of her in the New York Times where they asked her kind of like, how did you do it, right? And she actually, like, of all the people in the world, she talked about work-life balance. She talked about how she uses spreadsheets to run her life. She talked about it being important to remember that you can't do everything, that we all have to make choices, and that the choices need to be aligned with values and priorities. And if she can do that while quite literally saving the world, then I think we could probably all manage our calendars a little bit better, right? And make choices that are aligned with our values and priorities. So I think about her a lot. Certainly she's, more doing more busy and impactful work than many folks in the world. But the truth is that most of us have experienced burnout, and 43% of middle managers reported burnout in 2023, and that's more than any other group. And part of the reason for that is because we have too much on our plate, right? We feel like that squirrel. And so this is, you may have seen this is the Eisenhower matrix. And I love this, both as a filter, but also as a tool. So, if the x-axis is urgency and the y-axis is importance, there's one upper right, which is do now. So these are both urgent and important tasks with clear deadlines and consequences for not completing. And then everything else is either, urgent but not important but and not urgent, or urgent but not important. I think I skipped one, or maybe did that configure that wrong, but you can see this here. The idea that I like to use, the way that I like to deploy this is to ask the people that I'm working with to think through all of the things that we have on our list, and everybody takes a 4x4 and plots everything where they think everything goes, right? Invariably, almost everybody will put things in everything, or the majority of the things in urgent and important. And obviously not everything can be urgent and important. Not everything is urgent and important. And so what I like to do is to sit down with a group of people or another person who I'm working really closely with and say, okay, this is what you think, this is what I think, right? And then now let's come to what our shared priorities are, and how are we going to plot this in a way that not only will help us accomplish what we need to accomplish, but the other thing is, very often in those conversations, we realize that we're prioritizing things that are time wasters or busy work, right? Or things that can be done in 3 weeks, right? And so this can be a really impactful exercise, just to see it plotted out. Even just the sheer numbers in each of the quadrants can be really valuable data. So this is a tool I really like to use. Okay. The last area of focus is community. And, we started this work focused on women. Now we work with all genders. But we walked in with the assumption, like most people did, which is that women are great community builders. And what it turns out is true is we are very often surrounded by amazing people who we would do anything for. But when asked, when was the last time that you asked your community for help? Most of us don't have an answer that's very recent, right? So community here is about leveraging your professional network to level up, right? So this is about how you're taking advantage of the folks around you to help accomplish the goals that you want to accomplish. All right. So women on average have 3 times as many mentors as men, but men have twice as many sponsors. And so men are 45% more likely to have a sponsor than women, and this is across all industries. And so what this means is that men have people who are walking in the room, and advocating for them in the moments that matter. Harvard Business Review tells us that having a sponsor can have a significant impact on career development. They reported that 68 women with sponsors expressed career advancement satisfaction. And they're 20%, when we have sponsors, we're 27% more likely to ask for a raise and 22% more likely to ask for stretch assignments. So this is really, really tangible difference in what a sponsor can do. So Wall Street powerhouse Carla Harris is amazing. You should follow her on all the channels. She has a podcast, which is phenomenal. She has been at Morgan Stanley for a really long time. And she gives a really great TED talk about her aha moment when she was at a performance review evaluation roundtable. And she realized that in this closed door meeting, she said that the bucket that you're replaced in, which is the bucket that usually determines your bonus, determines, your career trajectory, really has a lot to do with whether or not someone at the table can advocate for you. Not whether it's neutral, not whether it's, and so she realized that a sponsor is the unlock that was going to be critical for her career. And she says a mentor is nice to have, but you can survive a long time in your career without a mentor, but you're not going to send in any organization without a sponsor. And so she says it's really important to ask yourself regularly, who's carrying my paper into the room? And this is as important if you're the boss as it is if you're not the boss, right? Whether it's your board, whether it's your clients, whether it's, who's advocating for you and the work that you do can make a meaningful impact in how successful you are. So, and this data is, I thought, really illuminating just in terms of how we're not likely to ask for help. So 73% of us don't ask for help before we absolutely need it. 50% of us wait to ask for help until we're completely overwhelmed. 8% ask when it's too late and we can't continue. 13% never ask at all. Only 27% ask for guidance before we start something new. And 53% feel held back from achieving goals because they try to go it alone. So this is a little bit of a trap, right? But it's a trap that we can untangle for ourselves. So in the context of community, we often say that relationship is a verb, right? It's not a transactional thing. It's something that you actively work on. And the goal here is to curate relationships where you're connecting, you're nurturing, and you're growing. And we, when we started this business, the question that took my breath away was, how can I help? And people just genuinely and selflessly asking that question, it really took me aback. And I didn't have an answer at first. And now I always have an answer of what do we need? And what do we have to offer, right? How can I help you? And what do I need? And I think that it's a really important thing to have at the tip of your tongue at any given moment. My co-founder, Monica, tells a story of a mentor saying to her, how can I help you? And she said, no, like he was her boss. I help you. That's the way this works. And he said, well, how does it feel when you help me? She said, oh, I feel like I'm, contributing. I feel like I'm creating value. And he said, well, when you tell me that I can't help you or there's nothing I can do to help you, deprive me of that feeling, which is a really good flip, right? Because it's like you're actually doing someone a favor when you ask them for a favor. So holding that in mind and also recognizing that there are many, many other people in the world who are asking for help all the time. Okay, so I want to make sure we have some time for questions and discussion. So this is just a quick summary of what we went through. The power of clarity is about unleashing confidence to stand up and stand out. The power of courage is about framing your value and showing up with a point of view. The power of conviction is about slowing down to speed up with an innovator's mindset. So taking that step back and broadening your aperture. And the power of commitment is about aligning your values, vision, and goals, and recognizing that reflection is really worthy work, even if it feels like something we don't have time for. And lastly, with the power of community, relationship is a verb. So with that, I'd love to open it up and take any questions that you all have, or if you want to talk more about any of these particular areas, I'm happy to go double click.
Yeah, and everybody feel free to either use the chat, or if you want to just come off mute and ask the question. Either is acceptable, whatever you feel most comfortable with.
I'll ask a question.
Yeah,
Can you
please
hear
do.
me?
And if you
Okay.
could introduce yourself as well, please.
I am Sylvia Salas. I'm the founder of Professional Development for Good and a nonprofit program called My Mentor. And what I do is I support emerging conservation leadership around the world.
Awesome.
And what I've noticed, and so I started as a primate ecologist and then realized that really I'm working less with animals every year and more and more and more with people on the ground who are protecting these animals. But what I've noticed is the biggest problem, and a problem that I personally have never had, is the lack of confidence. And I think a lot of confidence aligns with a lot of what you're saying here, you know, in terms of if you have confidence, you can have some of this. If you have this, you'll have more confidence. And I was hoping that maybe you could talk to us a little bit more about that topic of confidence, building confidence, gaining confidence, especially in young people.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, what we've seen in our work is that this really is like one of those practices, right? And creating space where the stakes are lower, where folks can practice with one another is part of the intent with our cohort design, right? We're putting people together with peers who can hold up a mirror to each other. And they end up growing really close and having some pretty deep conversations over the course of the 12 weeks that we spend together. That can apply to any community or any, you know, group of people. But I think a lot of times, you know, what we see with confidence, particularly in younger people, is, you know, when we don't have the experience, we're often just holding back, right? And so creating, you know, offering the ability to model or try out conversations is a really effective way to do it. There's another really great tool. I can't remember the guy's name now, but he does a TED talk about fear setting. And we actually do this in Beyond Barriers too. And the fear setting exercises, instead of planning your goals, like you sort of plan, what are you afraid of, right? And you start with like, basically what's the worst thing that could happen if you don't do this, if you don't do this, if you don't do this. 1 second. I've been talking too much today. That can often really create an awareness of, one, it's like the stakes are not as high as I thought they were, and two, not speaking up, you know, or not participating, the stakes are higher than, you know, than I thought they were. So both of those are two really effective ways. But I think that's, you know, one of the things that we've lost in hybrid and remote culture is that sitting with someone and having them, you know, give us real-time feedback. And so the more I think that we as leaders can partner up with people and encourage people to partner up with each other, part of what we do also is we pair people up in accountability partners. So there's kind of smaller group and then bigger group, and that is a practice I think is less common. And so I think it's an opportunity for those of us who've had the benefit of that to continue to share that in whatever wonky or awkward ways we can, given the way that we work today.
Thank you, Brooke. That was those were two very good ideas that I'll definitely be applying. Thank you so much for your well-articulated presentation today. I loved it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Brooke, Carla and I both sort of found it. Was it Ted Ferriss? Is that the gentleman that you were
Tim
mentioning?
Ferriss. That's right. Tim Ferriss.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Carla, thank you very much.
Hi, Brooke.
Anybody else have any questions for Brooke?
Hi, Brooke, and everyone. I'm Sada Fajani. I'm a social impact consultant that works locally in Chicago and internationally. My question is, one of the first slides you showed us is that the demographics have not really significantly changed, with white men at the top and white women followed closely after that. So BIPOC are way lower on the list. So thinking through your principles and thinking through that there is still systemic racism, patriarchy, and all the other oppressive systems still at play, how do you contend with people doing all the work and still getting back the feedback like, no, we'd rather go with this person because they fit what we think should be in this role, as opposed to someone who looks like me?
Yep. That's a great question, Sadaf. Thank you. That's part of the impetus for us doing this work. You know, my co-founders are, well, we each have a lot of intersections at play. You know, the numbers actually are worse than the ones that I showed, because the effect of COVID is making corporate America even, you know, less diverse than it was, for a number of different, not very good reasons. And that's something that we're really intentional about when we work with a company, is we want to make sure that they're ready to kind of receive the little fires that we're going to light. This is an A plus B scenario, where if A is the system and B is the individual, we believe if you change B, the outcomes change, but there's still systemic work to be done, right? And the reality is, in many organizations, the bar is very, very low, right? So starting somewhere, we believe is a worthy endeavor. And there's also a lot of room to impact the people who continue to persist in power, who don't have the imperative to improve themselves. It's interesting. There's a group who does similar work that Beyond Barriers does, that was started by a friend of mine, but they work primarily with allies. And the interesting dynamic is, when they offer it for free, they fill it up. White men come and they are happy to participate, but they can't sell it. And my hypothesis is they can't sell it because there's no urgency, right? Like, they're not struggling with anything. And so, unfortunately, at this point, you know, our greatest hope are, you know, leaders who believe that things need to be changed and who are actively changing things, as well as individuals who are pursuing, you know. And I think it's, you know, just as, you know, part of what we preach is that everyone's career is their own to manage, right? And so the ability to opt out where that is an option for folks is a powerful message. It's not always an option for everybody, but, you know, we're trying to teach everybody to do what they can with what they have. I wish I had a more satisfactory answer than that.
I have a quick question, Brooke, and I'm Shane. I'm part of Next Group and know quite a few folks on the phone. When you talked about I think it was one of your last slides that said, you know, women kind of don't ask for help until it's already catastrophic, or, you know, we wait quite a long time. You know, what kind of work do you do with the folks, or give us any quick example of like, hey, right? Because I tend to do it. Like, I don't want to be whiny. I can solve all the problems. I want to always be managing up. I don't want to have to bother that, you know, person where, you know, they might be able to resolve it really quickly for me. I don't want to, you know, I don't think people actually think other people are coming off as whiny when they do that. But what are some of the maybe like tips or things that you give to people to say, like, here's how to raise issues before maybe they can't become bigger or something like that? Because I think that can also be a really, you know, big stopper for people, career stopper even.
Yeah. So this research is not exclusive to women. This is everybody.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So we all struggle here. I think it's a really good question. And I think learning how to delegate and learning how to ask for help, you know, and learning how to say no to things and say yes. I mean, this was like a major aha moment for me. And it really, like, I had to like completely lose it and melt down at 4 a.m. working on a presentation. And I went into my CEO and he said, I've been waiting for this conversation. I knew this was coming, but I knew you had to get there yourself. And he gave me the tip that, you know, when you're saying no to one thing, you're actually saying yes to something else, which for me was a huge unlock. Like, that was so empowering for me to say, like, that sounds like a really cool project. Right now I'm really focused on this. And so in order to get this done, I need to say, you know, give me a week on that. Or that, you know, that's how I'm seeing the priorities today. If you want to talk about rejiggering my priorities, we can do that too, right? And so, like, that has been really empowering for me to just think about, you know, that transparency around what we're doing and why. I think they're like, we also do a training about accountability, and usually the breakdown in accountability is just assumptions, right? I assume that I want this by then, right? And I want it in this format, right? And then it comes back and it's not what I wanted, and then everybody's disappointed and frustrated, right? So a big piece of it is like getting crystal clear, right? Almost obnoxiously clear,
Sure.
right? And then following up and continuing to follow up. But I think, the other piece about just asking for help is it's about getting things done as efficiently as possible, right? So if you think about it in that, if I ask this person for help, how much time would that save me? And then how much more bandwidth would I have to focus on something else, right? Then that just makes your effectiveness radiate, right? And so if you can take it off of your hangups and get it into the effectiveness, sometimes that's easier for us. In
Thank you. That's
5
perfect.
minutes, I can talk to you. Okay.
I just had screaming in the background, so yours is like really well behaved.
Okay.
Thank you, though. That helps a lot. Appreciate it.
The other thing that I wanted, this is Steele, my son. The other thing that I wanted to share is that in partnership with Next Group, if anyone's interested in participating in a Beyond Barriers cohort, I need my chair, bud. We can offer preferred pricing if we can get hang on one second.
Aww. And in advance, while Brooke is sharing that, I'm going to include my email address in the chat for everybody, and we'll certainly follow up. But for anybody that's interested in the offer that Brooke is about to present to the group.
Thank you. We can offer preferred member pricing if we can get to a critical mass of folks from Next Group. So would love to talk to you about anyone here participating or your organizations if you think it's relevant. We kick off groups of individuals about once a month, and then we do bespoke work with organizations where we do cohorts of individuals within an organization every day. So.
That's fantastic. Brooke, on behalf of Candace and Shana and the entire team at Next Group, thank you so very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Brooke.
Absolutely fantastic, really.
Thank you all. And I just included my email in the chat. So
Wonderful.
It's great to meet you all.
Great to be with you. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you so very much. Brooke and I will stay on for another minute or so in case anybody's got any other questions. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording.